tal? Bienvenidos a otra conversación de Encuentros del Futuro. Estamos esta vez entrando en la línea de las ciencias sociales. Son unas ciencias muy recién recibidas como corresponde en el mundo de las ciencias, y este congreso ha tratado de relevarlas lo más posible, pues son el lado del cerebro científico que hoy día más está aportando una visión más integral sobre las decisiones que estamos tomando en el mediano plazo. Para eso hoy día estoy con José Pinto Ribeiro, podría pronunciarlo mejor, pero lo vamos a hacer así porque habla un poco de español. Y estoy también con Hervé Lebois. El primero es abogado portugués, habla sobre los fenómenos de migración y la situación de los refugiados desde la perspectiva legal, un tema que hemos tratado de tratar en este Congreso Futuro insistentemente, pues es uno de nuestros temas como país. Mientras Hervé es demógrafo e historiador francés, aborda el complejo y desafiante escenario planteado por los movimientos migratorios mundiales, los efectos de la globalización y los desafíos de la democracia. Thank you very much for being with us in this conversation.
Thank you. Welcome.
We, just like the world, we are living these migrations reality right now, and we don't really know what to do with it. We have a lot of places where we don't have solutions, you know, we tell people to come here, or we said we are an open country, but then we have a lot of problems here. So what do you think it is place, an exit to start to build a solution, Hervé?
That's a very difficult question because more and more populations are reacting against migrations and they feel as a threat for them to have a large migration, and they think in terms of invasion in Europe. Very often they say we are invaded, like at the end of the Roman Empire.
Yes.
But it has nothing to do with the history. We are in a very different situation. Always migration were quite weak. There is exception with America, but all the story of Europe, there are migrations, but local migrations. And what is new is migrations from everywhere. And we believe that most of them are poor people. Mm-hmm. But in fact, it's the opposite. Most of them now are qualified people, even but you will speak better than me about the refugee, but even those refugees who arrive from Syria in Europe, they have diplomas, they are qualified. Those who are not qualified, those who are unskilled, remain, and they are very numerous, remain in Turkey, remain in Jordania, remain in Lebanon. If you think of Lebanon, I believe there are about 1 million refugees from Syria and Lebanon, but they are poor. They cannot afford to go to Europe, and there is more we make walls to stop migrations, and it is the case. Legal wall or real wall with barbed wires, and more we do that, more we select the migrants. They arrive, but those who have more money, those who have more diploma arrive, and they will continue to arrive. It is part of the globalization, the migration process, and that is very new. It cannot be. We cannot use examples from the remote past to understand what is going on just now, and we have very false representation of what is going on because we take example from the past. If I take the example of France, in France, many French believe that migrants who arrive are poor people with a lot of children. And it was the case during the 70s when we needed poor people to make hard work in the factories, on the roads. But now it's finished. Those who arrive, I told in the my lecture, I said that last year in France, 65% of those who arrived on a legal basis had completed secondary school or had an university degree. That's a very different migration. And
Yes.
people don't arrive to understand that the future is that kind of migration. Of course, there
But
will remain migration.
It's not
of
that
poor.
only that migration, it's also this poor migration. I want to talk about that one because this qualification, this conversation about if they are or not qualified, may change the point of the conversation, which is, should we receive people just because they need to be received? I mean, what do you think?
Thank you very much. I would like to start by the focal point, in my opinion, of this question. And the focal point has to do with human rights. To know whether human rights are human rights of humans, or if human rights are human rights granted by national states to certain people,
Yes.
to their nationals, and, if they so want, to others who come to them. This is a qualification to determine whether everybody in the world has a human right to go wherever he pleases and to be accepted. It doesn't mean that he has political rights. It doesn't mean that he has social rights. But he has the right to move. He has the right to get free of the place where he was born. He has the right to vote with his feet. So to abandon the place where he was. What we have is that before the end of the 19th century, before the First World War, people wandered around. If you read Stefan Zweig, you know that people had no passports, they had no identification. They went to America with nothing except their own bodies and some luggage they had to take with them. They got names when they got to America. They had no certificate of birth, that everything did not exist. But after the First World War, when we organized all the territories based on nation states, and the nation state is a generalization done after the First World War, when the empires crumbled, and this made that human rights were no more rights of every human, but were only rights based on national states. And the national state would only recognize national rights, that means civil rights, to the people who are national.
Yeah.
And this changed totally the scenario. And this is why I heard Hervé Lebras saying that now migrants are very often very qualified people. I must say that the Jewish migrants that left Germany were very frequently very qualified people. Einstein was the most qualified people of his time, but Freud was a very qualified people. And they all had to leave, and they were migrants, and they were refugees, and they had to go away. And all those who went were normally very qualified. I can name hundreds of very qualified Jews.
But these qualified people is...
I'm sorry, but this means that the problem with the different one, the problem with the refugee, the problem with the categorization of the other, who is considered as not being unequal to us, is the problem. This is the problem. And after the Second World War, after all this drama of the refugees and of the people killed by the Second World War just because they were different, after the Holocaust and all that, what we tried was, on the level of the declaration, the Universal Declaration of Rights, that everybody, independently from where they were born, what nationality they had, whatever they had, that they would have basic human rights, and that those rights would not only be recognized, but necessarily served by all the states belonging to
that's not happening, and we know that.
And why does it not happen? because we still have not denationalized fundamental rights, because we have never established that fundamental rights are not fundamental rights of Chileans in Chile, but are fundamental rights of Chileans in Chile, but of Chileans in Bolivia,
Yeah,
but of
what do
Chileans
you
in
do?
Peru.
What do
This
you do
means
when you have countries? I mean, what are we going to, how are we going to fix this globalized world and trying to have a globalized law too? What do you do?
Two ways, in my opinion. You create constitutional law that in relation to the first generation of rights, the civil rights of any human being, the rights which the American Constitution recognizes to their citizens without discussing politics and without discussing social rights, the basic human rights, that those rights are put on every born person independently of whatever else. And if we succeed in doing this as a constitutional movement in all the constitutions of the world, imposed by legislation that comes from the United Nations or by other regional organizations, it would be feasible to think that those basic rights would exist, for instance, in relation to all Latin American inhabitants, all from South America, that they could move around, and that by moving around they would have the same rights.
Yeah. What's your experience? Because you have had this feeling of being invaded for a long time. I mean, not just because the migrations that we're living now, but you have a lot of people from Africa in France. So how is the conversation, how it evolves during this time?
Yes, the problem is, I think, is with politicians largely, because in France and in Europe, they use the theme of migration for their purpose, and there is only, as far as I know, one country, Canada, where the politicians decided not to put migrations as above in the agenda.
Yes.
They have a special way to deal with migrations. They try to put together the people who are against and for, and the migrants, and to try, so they decide between themselves, but not to put it on the global political agenda. But it's very difficult. In France, it was put on the agenda by the ultra-right, by the extreme right, and it was copied by the center and the right, and now it is copied by the left, and only the ultra-left is not going into this place, we can say, and that's the first point, very difficult, because in fact, migrants after one generation, they are part of the country. If you take, for example, France, during the interwars, people coming from Italy or from Spain were considered as, or from Poland they were considered very dangerous because of their religious ascendance, because they were integrist Catholics. And now nobody, the sons and the descendants of these Polish people are like all the French. It's no more a problem, and it was a good thing in Europe to open the border with the European Union. It was solved in economic terms at the beginning, but it was associated with the free circulation of the people. That was very, very great success, because Europe understood that if they stayed, as you said, as national state, some war could occur, and the best way to impeach
Yes.
The war was to open the border in Europe, but now we are in a difficult situation because, say, the British, they are closing.
We're going to talk about Brexit and Trump and all these terrible
Thank you.
ending world signs we are living now, but we're going to make a pause, okay? Un segundo y ya volvemos. Estamos hablando de los fenómenos migratorios, de cuál es este entuerto en que estamos metidos, de resolver. En este caso se plantea mucho el caso francés y cómo se han recibido distintas oleadas de migraciones y cómo ha cambiado también la postura dentro del país. Y por otro lado hablábamos aquí de cómo tratamos de enfrentar un fenómeno global con una conciencia local, con estos límites que son los países, y finalmente lo que termina pasando es que unos tienen más derechos que otros, sobre todo los que pertenecen a los que vienen llegando, no se respeta esta conciencia permanente de los derechos humanos. Por eso queremos continuar hacia allá y ver qué salidas podemos tener para estos temas. So, we were talking recently about how the politics have built this terrible scenario. Like, they have used a lot this conversation about migrations for politics, but they had divided a lot the societies in terms of who belongs and who doesn't belong to the territory. So what do you think could be the way we as a society, as a new society, as a new world could face this? But what are really our hopes right now?
Should I?
You could.
Thank you.
You're watching me.
Yes. Yes, we have a Portuguese poet who says about this global situation, and it is not just a migrant and a refugee situation, it is the situation of the emerging global problems that nobody cares about, or nobody seems to be able to come to a conclusion, a common conclusion about public policy to address these items.
Because it's too difficult. I mean, you need so many agreements.
No, I don't think it is a technical problem. I believe that the problem is somewhere else. You have the ecological problem. You have the problem of the heating of the global. You have the problem of the ozone layer. You have a number. You have the problem of illnesses
global problems and national realities.
Yes, and this is and about this he says he uses a famous phrase from Churchill, and he says it's not the end of the world. It's probably not even the beginning of the end of the world, but we must admit it is becoming a little bit late to solve those problems in a composed way. It means in a peaceful way, in an understandable way. And we are losing the time in which we can solve these problems without recurring to the same solutions we had in the past, which are war. And this is no solution. And what we have in front of us is, are we going to keep on trying the same solutions to solve the problems between national states, or are we succeeding at least in facing those main global problems, in coming to common solutions and to exercise those public policies, in the sense that the problem lies that the distribution of costs and of profits by those policies, by those public policies, is not the same among the national states. This means if we deal with the ozone layer, Chile will have a great advantage because it has a problem with the ozone layer. But other countries don't have the same problem. They don't lie where Chile lies. And so they are not willing to suffer some economic disadvantage.
But right now we're sharing a lot of problems. I mean, it's not the ozone layer. Right now we have global problems, so we could have enough reasons to have global solutions. But
the distribution of costs is not even. So some countries are not willing to suffer the costs, to bear the costs of a new policy.
so should we have a common budget?
Yes, we
Global
should.
budget?
For some of those problems, in my opinion, we should have organizations in which the budgetary problem, in which the costs for the solutions and for the policies should be addressed.
Do you think that is about budget? I mean, or about organizations? Because we already have the ONU,
no.
the OEA, and a lot of global organizations that Trump says, I don't care.
First, I will say, of course, there are global problems, but if you, like me, you are a demographer and you are watching at the data, what you see? You see that the expectation of life made extraordinary gains in the last 30 years, in Chile, but also in Africa, everywhere. Education made fantastic improvements all over the world. Poverty is diminishing. You know, for Chile, it's very clear, but it's the only place where it is not clear is United States and Great Britain. Eating for the world. The global the global production of food is now, it was recognized by the FAO, is now sufficient. There is unequal distribution, but it is sufficient. All these things are very good things, and sometimes I'm astonished they are not taken into account, and I think they are not taken into account because now, because what we call populism ideology, the ideology that there exist different people with different identity, separated from each other. That's the real matter of what we call populism, and it is going. It is spreading in the world. It's spreading in Turkey with Erdogan, in Russia with Putin, and so on, and with Trump in the state. And one task of people like us is to fight against that ideology with real data, with real things, with the reality, because the reality is we are very diverse. There is, for example, the question of identity, national identity. Now, some French are foolish about that. I published in 2 months a small book with a strong criticism of the idea of national identity. It has no, you cannot define national identity. You can define it only in a very fascist government where everybody is treated as the same. But with a very diverse society, and we have to, as social scientists, you have to say that, to explain that to the people, and to make
denationalizing nations. This is denationalizing.
Yeah,
yes,
that's
it's a way. It's a way
of
at the bottom. Yes, you are in the air, and I'm at the bottom, and to put out of the brain of the people that they have a national identity very clear. It's not clear when to try to define it.
We feel so afraid of different people, but if we trace our own genes, I mean, we are from everywhere in the world right now, and in the future that's going to be better. I will say the word worse.
They are not different. They are just from another state, but they are just like you.
Yes.
You, Paloma, could obviously be a Peruvian or from somewhere else, or from Brazil. I'm sorry, Gisela Bündchen is from Brazil, but she could be from somewhere else.
Of course.
So
she's not different.
And you would be.
This is all about being afraid of everything.
No, and you could be with
1
per 1,000 change in your ADN. You could be a Chinese or a Congolese. Yes.
Yeah, sure, for sure. But right now we are in this moment, I mean, and we are living here, not in 500 years more, that this is going to be solved, probably. But right now, It's about creating a new budget, but who's going to put the money there?
I'm sorry.
It's about believing in a
reforming
common...
the United Nations. If I say it this way, maybe you believe, you understand what I'm talking about. I'm not saying it's the problem. Yes, but the United States will not be part of it. This means that the problem is not only reforming the United Nations, it is reforming the legal international system, in the sense that there are things that are right and there are things that are wrong that the states must do. We have a system in which...
By law, to have really... we need some force. I mean, I don't know.
No.
You can't make the countries do what United Nations says,
I'm sorry.
finally.
No, that's not absolutely true. The reason why we can't do that is because the body that says what is right and wrong is a paralyzed body. It's called the Security Council. But if you change the body making the rules, for instance, to a system like an Anglo-Saxon system of judges sitting somewhere that they decide what applies, what the rule should be by a system of precedent and of a common law system, and that the United Nations can create this and say this is right, this is wrong. For instance, invading Iraq. Was it right or was it wrong? If the Security Council had decided that it was right, it would be right. It did not decide, so it is wrong. This makes it a criminal a war crime, this invasion? Is George W. Bush or is Tony Blair responsible for that or not? Having a rule is essential. You don't have necessarily to make people abide by that. But let me say it this way. When you have violation of human rights in a country, and you have Human Rights Watch, and you have Amnesty International, and you have other entities saying, there is violation, there is this is already a sanction in relation to that regime, it is already a sanction in relation to that country.
But is that enough? Do you believe in law as a solution? Or the judgment,
no,
the common
I think,
judgment?
but something can be made by the law. For example, I think you made allusion to Trump and to Brexit and so on. One reason of the success of Trump is linked to what is Facebook, Twitters, and so on. Why? Because with Facebook, Twitters, and so on, they constitute small communities, small closed community, with no access with other community. And inside this small community, foolish idea can grow, and it was the case for the Trump. He said counter truth. But inside Facebook communities or Twitter's community, says a counter-truth were taken as truth. He said things about the environment, for example, about the workers, the Mexican workers.
Yes.
What we'll see is people do if you want to have new investments with the roads, with the ferrocarril, with all those investments, they need manpower, and they need manpower which are Mexican manpower, and at the same time he's doing. But people believe that because they are taken inside small closed groups, and my proposition is to forbid the use of Facebook and Twitter.
I don't know if you're going to succeed.
No, he's not going to succeed. But what he means is important. He means that there are opportunities for people to break these frontiers and these borders. Because what Trump does, what many people do, what many politicians do, is they create their own community and they make borders around that community. And then, through this community, they establish a direct link with the voters, and the voters will follow them. But for instance, why is it difficult? Why would it be difficult for people who have more or less the same origin, who speak the same national language, let us say so, who speak all Spanish, except the Brazilians who speak Portuguese. Why is it difficult to make agreements by which the basic rights, the fundamental basic rights, are recognized to all those living in these borderlands? Why is it difficult? Why doesn't Chile and Paraguay and Argentina and Uruguay and
Simón
why?
Bolívar used to say the same a long time
And he
ago.
had great success. He had great success. If it was not for Simón Bolívar,
I really hope it works. And please, during my lifetime, because I want to see the hope with my eyes.
Sorry, but in your lifetime it is already working, because this is something that is also very important. Because there is a big discrimination. Because you don't have to have those basic civil rights recognized to go abroad and be recognized as such. You can easily travel, because there is also a social division within and inside the states that makes that you are a citizen of the world. No, you are a citizen of the world. You can go wherever you want. I can go wherever I want. Nobody cares. They grant me whatever rights I have, and if I say yes, I can become a Chilean or I can become whatever I want, but those others can't. And this division is the essential division that has to be broken. It can only be broken by saying the others are the same like us on this first level of just basic human rights.
I can add something from the real world, that in the developed countries, mixed unions, people from different origins who marry together, are growing very rapidly. And it was clear, Trump understood that. He said, it is the last time whites can win. It's the last generation. And he's true for one time.
Because the next one is going to be mixed.
Because we are more and more métis, and that's very important. And some aggressivity against the others or against the migrants is the fact that the people are feeling that the time of unique white and so on it's finished, and they see all of and
it was already finished. So Trump is right, but is wrong, because in reality he himself is a
German origin.
Right.
Of course,
totally wrong,
of course.
We have to finish this conversation, but thank you very much for being here in the Congress, in the future Congress.
And
thank you very much for your invitation. Your beautiful Congress.
Yes.
And it's great that we have the idea that if we cannot, let us say, foresee the future, then let us design it.
Yes.
Okay.
We can say also that the best example of opening the world is science, and it is the Congress.
That's the hope we have.
Yes.
Muchas gracias por haber estado en esta conversación. Ustedes también tenemos demasiadas tareas por delante, así que nos encontramos pronto en otra conversación.
Mucho gusto, mucho placer.